rises from the mist, outside of time. It flows across the rolling hills, green and gentle, wild and tangled, with the quiet music of a long summer afternoon and the slow leafy calm of the forest. The first Americans called them Shikanagay Dunodaksha, Blue Ridge, the unending mountains. They talked of their journeys and the trails that wind across these hills. These are the paths their ancestors walked, the paths we are walking still. Mountains. These mountains are older than the Himalayas, older than the Alps. Over the centuries, many have come here. First the Cherokees, then the settlers from across the oceans, Germans and English Quakers, Scots, Irish and Welsh, and African slaves too. It's a mix that would create a unique culture, an Appalachian style. Some were naturalists. Some came to work the soil. And some to travel the entire length of these woodlands. It's just a thin ribbon of road, but it winds its way through some of the most remarkable land on Earth. The Blue Ridge Parkway, a unit of the National Park Service, connects the Great Smoky Mountains and Shenandoah National Parks. A place so special that these mountains are congressionally designated as the Blue Ridge National Heritage Area. From Waynesboro, past Roanoke, Blowing Rock, Asheville, Cherokee, 469 miles of spectacular scenery, 151 bridges, 275 vista points, over 200 communities and small towns, rolling through the valleys and the highlands, winding past forests and ravines. It's not just a road, it's a path to adventure. The journey of a lifetime. Everyone who comes to the Blue Ridge chooses their own route. But some, like Lynn and Marshall Terry, are here to do more than just ride the parkway. For them, it's a rite of passage, a chance to connect with the past, the history of this place, and the history of their family.
My dad and I have been talking about this trip for years, how we were going to ride the entire Blue Ridge Parkway from one end to the other.
This is really nostalgic. I mean, I haven't been here since I was a little boy. My dad and I took this trip on the Parkway, and now to be able to take this journey with my daughter, we're very fortunate to be able to do this.
Their trip, like so many to the Blue Ridge, is a journey back in time, for the culture here stretches back for centuries. It echoes across the hills. Larry Brown has been around music his whole life. He's one of many instrument makers in the area. It's a tradition that's passed on through the generations. His great-grandfather was a square dance fiddler, and now he's taken up the family tradition.
The fiddle that my great-great-grandfather played was handed down through the family, and now I own it, and that's the fiddle that I play on.
A classically trained violinist and writer, Larry pursues his passion for old-time mountain music. Today, he makes fiddles and violins.
When I'm carving away, I have in my mind a picture of exactly what shape and what response acoustically the wood is going to give me.
Each instrument is made by hand using antique tools he's collected over the years.
Many of the tunes that we play are actually hundreds of years old. The music is always passed down by ear. One fiddler will teach another fiddler, and the old will teach the young.
Europeans brought the fiddle, enslaved Africans brought the banjo, and from their meeting 4 centuries ago in Tidewater, Virginia, a new American music was born. It lives on along Virginia's heritage music trail, the Crooked Road. Winding for over 200 miles across southwestern Virginia, the Crooked Road passes through some of the most musical places on earth. Tiny rural Appalachian communities that have been producing extraordinary musicians for generations. These musicians have been creating old-time, bluegrass, and mountain gospel songs that have helped shape American music for decades. The Crooked Road celebrates the living musical culture of this region, which today not only survives, but thrives.
There are so many people that have flocked here from all over the country to play this type of music that you can always find a jam session or an evening session out in the yard or in somebody's living room where this type of music will be played.
Every year, there are hundreds of music festivals and thousands of jam sessions in the Blue Ridge region. This is just one of them. On Friday evenings, Larry and his friends, a group that includes regional and national fiddle champions, gather around campfires or out on front porches, and the good times roll. While some folks have the opportunity to enjoy the evening, others are already getting started on the next day's work. Like park botanist Dr. Chris Ulrey. For Chris, the office is a rock face that's more than 1 billion years old.
Some of the most unique habitats on the parkway are these high elevation rock outcrops. As a plant ecologist, conservation of these rare species is a high priority for the Blue Ridge Parkway, because if we don't do this important work, these species may go extinct and disappear from the face of the earth. One of my jobs is to monitor the rare species that occur in the park. The only way to tell whether these rare plants are stable is to check on them each year, even if that means crawling out on the rock face. Being out there on the rock, hanging from a rope, is not exactly my idea of fun, but it's work that's got to be done, and it's important work. Typically at these sites we tag individual plants, we measure them and record data about those species, and we link all that data over a period of time. If they're decreasing, then we would look for measures that we could take that would stabilize the population. I feel like I'm playing a small role in the protection and preservation of these rare plants.
From dogwood and iris to flame azalea, and with over 100 different species of trees, it's no wonder that naturalists and artists have been drawn here for years. And they're not the only ones. For generations, families have been coming to enjoy the simple pleasures: camping and fishing and hiking the land. These mountains contain some of the wildest spots in the eastern United States. Untouched, untamed. For centuries, it's been an oasis of calm.
this. We're in Maybury Mill. This is where I used to love to come when I was a kid with your granddaddy, believe it or not.
I can't imagine you as a kid.
Look at how far we've come in Virginia.
A third of the way.
Yeah, 170 miles.
I don't want it to be over too quickly.
Well, look at how far we've got to go here. I mean,
The Blue Ridge Parkway is more than one road. It's the gateway to an entire region. Hundreds of trails and opportunities to explore. For Lynn and Marshall, they're here to do much more than just take a motorcycle ride. They're here to follow those trails as they intersect with a remarkable piece of their heritage. They're traveling into the heart of an extraordinary region, full of natural diversity and a great melting pot of creative talent, old-time folk traditions, and home to thousands of remarkable artisans. Like Rob Mangum, what Rob has found here in the Blue Ridge comes from the ground he walks each day. Like many of the master potters here, his creations are born out of the region's clay soil itself, and a tradition that's been passed from father to son.
Growing up in the pottery studio was a great way for me to learn how to work with clay, because as a child I could just walk into the studio, my parents were in there working, and I could grab a hunk of clay, make something, and that was a great way to learn it, is just to grow up around it.
To work with my son is always a pleasure. It's always great to get together and share and work together. I'm always amazed by Rob and Beth and their creativity and what they produce. They really have continued a tradition that runs very, very deep in this region.
Once the pot is glazed, you load it into the kiln and you fire it. Opening the kiln and seeing what's in there is so exciting. It's like Christmas morning. It's always an unknown.
I think it shows that our pots are made with a lot of love, a lot of patience, and they're made by hands that care.
Patty Tourneau is a master quilter whose works have been exhibited all over the United States. Like many of the quilters in the region, she too learned close to home.
My mom taught me how to sew when I was 7, the same way that my grandmother taught my mother. I've traveled all over the world looking for different kinds of cottons and silk fabrics. I have probably about 1,200 pounds of textiles, and there's nothing like bringing it all home and getting started on the next quilt. When I start making a quilt, the first thing that happens is pieces of fabric go up on the wall, and I get to see how the colors interact and how the patterns interact, and there's always adjusting that needs to happen. And as I take them off the wall and take them over to the sewing machine, it becomes a different pursuit altogether. I get to be very precise. Quilts are holders of our memories. They're oftentimes little pieces of our lives in quilts. And older quilts, they were actually the maps of a person's childhood. One of the saddest days for me is when I finish a quilt. On the other hand, it makes me really happy because I know that it's ready to go out into the world, and hopefully that will bring happiness to other folks.
If a new generation of artisans here have become famous for their work, it's not just the inspiration they draw from the mountains. It's the way they take the outside world and bring it all back home. Take the world-renowned glassblowers who work here, artisans like John Littleton and Kate Vogel.
We've been working together for 27 years now, and we love the whole experience of glass blowing.
We always push ourselves to come up with new ideas, to really define the ideas that we're working with.
The pieces start to evolve, and so what we have in the end isn't a piece that's mine or John's, but a piece that we would only create if the two of us were working together.
We came up with the bags together.
The bags are just really fun to make. They're loose, they're fluid. One of the things that was really appealing to us about this area is that there's such an incredible wealth of tradition in the crafts. People have been making handmade items for generations.
All of these folk artists help preserve the unique traditions that have developed over generations and the gentle pace of the craftsman's life. But not everything moves slowly around here. trails isn't just the quiet moments by the fire. On public lands adjacent to the parkway, riders can take it to the edge and beyond. It's hard to believe that anyone could tame this rugged landscape. But back in the 1930s, in one of the toughest times this country has ever known, a handful of men decided to try. Some said it was like painting with the tail of a comet. Little by little, a remarkable road was cut through the mountains. But nothing about it was easy. Stanley W. Abbott was the primary architect of the Blue Ridge Parkway. He cut this remarkable trail through the wilderness, and it wasn't easy. For Abbott and his team of builders, it was an engineering miracle to open this scenic beauty to visitors and not destroy it. The parkway took decades to finish, well into the late 1980s. But today they call it the Grand Balcony, the best view of the Appalachians. Lynn and Marshall Terry are getting close to a special stretch of the parkway. The place where they connect with their family history.
What's up, Dad?
I just wanted to stop and show you something. Well, remember we talked about your grandfather?
Yeah.
And how he was a mason, and they worked on this road. They built this road, and they built this tunnel.
Oh.
And this is part of your heritage, and this is one of the reasons why I want to take this trip.
Oh.
Because I mean, this is you have a piece of this. So I want to show you something else. Take a look at that. That's this tunnel.
Wow.
Creature in there.
Look how young he is.
I know. Let's get a closer look. Amazing, huh?
Oh. He's gonna be here a long time.
I think so. Some trip, huh?
Oh, Dad.
Glad we did it. Glad we did it.
Of course, not every trip through the Blue Ridge is about history. Some aren't even on land. For some families, their travels take them down by the riverside and the whitewater action of the Nantahala River.
For every journey has a beginning and an end, and many will travel the same trail, all connected on the same timeless journey. This is what our Cherokee ancestors told us. They had to walk the trail of tears. Many died in those dark days, but in the end, we ended up right back here, where we belong, in the Blue Ridge, our ancestral home.
For Lynn and Marshall, and so many others, the journey finishes near the end of the Blue Ridge Parkway with a very